All right. So I got asked a question if I would do a little bit about CBD and all the benefits there. Absolutely. I think the easiest thing to point out is why cannabis is even legal in some states. And that's 100% because of the massive, undeniable, ridiculous health benefits of cannabis. If you go back to Charlotte's Web, so if you guys don't familiar with the story, there was a little girl named Charlotte who was having multiple, like dozens of seizures a day. And it was literally killing her and destroying the family. And her dad was a firefighter. And they went and they got her cannabis from, I want to say Colorado. And it stopped her seizures. And it was 100% medicinal. They were not getting high. They were not doing that stuff. They were just stopping the epileptic seizures their daughter was having. And I want to say it was the state of Massachusetts, tried to arrest this guy for medically taking care of his sick daughter. And it became such a backlash that people were like, wait, the government's keeping people from being healthy, which they do all the time. Let's not make a question about that. But people got mad. And so they were like, hold on, wait, they're giving this girl marijuana, weed, and it's fixing her brain? And when it came out that, yeah, that's 100% what was going on. And then they started using cannabis for a lot of other epilepsy, and it really, really helped. That's when people were like, hold on. Our government has told us that this is 100% bad, and it's only bad, and it has no good function, and that's why it's 100% illegal. However, we're seeing it stop seizures better than drugs. And so that's where a lot of this started. A lot of the legalization push for this started was with Charlotte. And that's why they have the whole CBD line of Charlotte's Web and the whole deal. So that's the first piece. I did my TED talk on replacing opioids with cannabis because cannabis is substantially safer than opioids, and it can replace pain drugs, opioid drugs, 64% of the time. And that includes everything. And like, no one's trying to say that we shouldn't use fentanyl to knock people out for surgery. We should be using cannabis. No one's saying that. But remember, fentanyl is an opioid. And so when we talk about all reasons for using opioids, surgery is one of them. So think about that. If you take out all the surgical need, 64% of the time for pain still works. So, it's a large amount of times that cannabis works for pain. However, and there are studies, and I'll bring some up, on things like anxiety. Cannabis is amazing for anxiety. Now here's the problem. Dose is a thing. And I don't understand I get where the medical community uses this as a lie, because the medical community knows dose is a thing, 100% they know, but they don't want natural things to help. And so they lie about this stuff, or they don't lie. They're intellectually dishonest. So they're like, cannabis doesn't help with anxiety. When I smoke an entire joint, I get really paranoid. Yeah, when you take 500 milligrams in, when you need 10 and you massively overdose, yeah, it's not gonna help. That's not what we're talking about. The idea that, it's either, zero cannabis or smoking an entire 1 gram is, it has to work on both or else it doesn't work. It's absurd. We see this a lot. So like with the strips we have, the ones that I did my TED talk over, we see this all the time. So we can cut the piece off. People's anxiety calms down. People can relax. They can calm their mind down, and they can get to sleep. Cannabis has a great way of inhibiting amygdala function, which is the amygdala is the part of the brain that holds fear, hate, anger, terror, anxiety, all that type of stuff. And cannabis can suppress that. And it's not just CBD, it's CBD with THC. What we've seen more or less in research is that the CBD is the steering wheel that drives it, and the THC is the engine that powers it. And again, dose is a thing. So if you're using the right amount, you get really, really, really great results with it. If you're using too much, you get the wrong results, just like any other thing. So let me run through some of the little quick stuff that we pulled up, just real easy. You guys can use Grok or whoever you want to kind of pull these things up. But for anxiety, there's a 2024 meta-analysis of 8 RCTs, massive benefit for reduction in anxiety using full spectrum CBD. There's a 2020 systemic review, again, effective for PTSD, anxiety disorders, and stuff like that. Massive reduction in social anxiety, 2019. For pain, They saw a 2023 systemic review, 15 studies showed between a 42 and 66% reduction in pain. 2023 umbrella review, 30% reduction in chronic pain, which is not the same thing. That's like more arthritis, more like crushed nerves, more things like that, things that people are on long-term opioids for, injections, things like that. So instead of taking opioids, which are massively addictive and deadly, we could be using cannabis, even at here's the thing, even at levels lower than would cause psychological change. So basically, you're not high, but you're also not in pain. And I talk about this in my TED Talk. So when my son had 6 screws and a plate removed out of his arm, and he had an 1 by 5 inch piece of skin cut off because he had this weird scar, it was a negative reaction to the dissolvable stitches that messed with his arm. All we gave him when he came home were small pieces of the cannabis strips that we have in the office, the CBD Delta 8 strips that Dan Patrick tried to make illegal. He didn't get to, though, because Abbott actually cares about people and Patrick just cares about the money he's getting from the alcohol industry. Totally different subject. It was great. Worked really, really well. He had no pain. He never got high, never had any psychological changes. He was a slightly bit more calm, though, which is awesome for someone who's just had surgery. But yeah, and then so this 2021 RCT med on neuropathic pain, 400 milligrams reduced neuropathic pain 25 to 40%. So think about that. A substance that a natural substance that has really no death associated with it, and a very, very, very small actual addiction function associated with it, reduces neuropathic pain by up to 40%, chronic pain by over 30%, and pain in overall most cases up to 66% of the time it reduces that pain. So instead of giving drugs that we know cause massive addiction and have a direct path to death, we could be using cannabis for this. This is what we're talking about. And I know that people are out there, saying, unbelievable things. They're studying that all your gray matter goes away if you use cannabis. That's the most flawed. It is literally the most flawed and just hysterical misrepresentation of science I think I've ever seen. I like Dr. Amen. I think he's a good guy. I think he's trying to help people, and he's done a phenomenal amount of work. The guy has done some great work, but I think he's just trying to get clicks on this one and trying to tell everybody that if you smoke cannabis or you use cannabis, your brain's going to run away to nothing. I don't know. You look at guys like Joe Rogan, you look at guys like me, and maybe he's wrong. I don't know. There's a lot of issues with a lot of the things people are saying about this. It's like, well, it causes psychosis. It's like, no, it doesn't. It's like, well, have you not read about cannabis psychosis? All right, so here's what's going on. Everybody has a little bit different genetic function, and people are. So here's the other bottom line you have to understand, and this is one of those things you have to understand 2 or 3 things to get this issue. You have to understand that 1, everyone's body works a little bit differently, and 2, all neurologic psychological disorders are nutrient deficiencies, all of them. It's like, well, that's not true. Okay, well, psychosis is a dopamine problem. Where do we get dopamine? Is that a drug, or is that a naturally occurring thing that is in your body? It's naturally occurring, which means it's a nutrient. So as long as we get the chemicals in our bodies required to form nutrients and maintain nutrient function, you're good. A lot of that psychosis stuff is tied to COMT issues and digestive gut issues, because where your neurotransmitters made in your gut. And whereas the medical community 100% trying to tell everybody it doesn't exist, parasitic infections, which do what? Destroy gut function and decrease neurotransmitter production. So here you go. That's probably where we should start looking for those things. But there is a tremendous amount of research on the benefits of CBD, from eczema, from psoriasis, from anxiety, from depression, from sleep disorders, from pain, from neuropathic pain, from chronic pain, from arthritic pain, from all types of pain. Like the report I read you, 66% of all pain can be subjectively and objectively removed with cannabis, with CBD. So yeah, there's a lot of benefit that this stuff brings to the table, but you're not being told about it because it doesn't further the agenda of medicine, which is make you worse so they can sell you drugs forever, and sell you drugs that only they're allowed to sell you. That's the big thing. So, maintain that monopoly, maintain your illness, and then maintain the cash flow from you forever. That's the medical model. That's why it's not, if you look at the medicine, it's not, and you can look this up, it's not eradication of disease, it's management of disease. Their big thing is disease management. Because if you manage a disease, you make sure that the person keeps the disease, but they keep buying the things from you every day to manage it. Now, if you want to eradicate disease, that's a completely different model and a completely different path, and it's not, according to the medical system, what they're trying to do. So just, balls and strikes, it's where it is. So if you guys are wondering, hey, does this CBD stuff actually work? Yeah, it works really, really well. You've got to get good, clean stuff, and it has to have THC in it for it to really work. But that's kind of where it is. And it is safe for your kids. It is, I've been saying this for a long time, because so the Tylenol thing, guys, the natural community, the chiropractic community has known about Tylenol as long as I've been around. As long as I've been around the community, we were talking about how bad vaccines were and how bad Tylenol was for you because of the glutathione issue when I was going through chiropractic college in 07. I graduated in 07, so in 05. So 20 years ago, we were talking about this. This isn't new information. So yeah, a little bit of our strips, a little bit of the cannabis stuff, a little bit of a good, clean, again, good stuff. Cannabis would be better for your kids' pain than Tylenol, than Advil, than any opioid. And I think the research backs that up, and I think the logic backs that up as well. But you're not going to find that from an MD, because the MDs are taught in school that only the drugs that come from the FDA are good for people, and everything else is trash and quackery and not right. Because what is the purpose of med school? To teach people to sell drugs. So that's kind of where that is. So if you're wondering why the confusion, that's it. So look at the studies, look at what's going on, look at the benefit, look at the massive, giant benefit in things like epilepsy, pain, and anxiety and stuff like that, and sleep from that people are reporting from CBD and from cannabis. So what you have to make sure you're doing is you're listening to the people. Don't listen to the government. Never listen to the government. Don't listen to the government's representatives, like the people who are trained through the medical system. Listen to the moms. Like, look how long have the moms been screaming about vaccines causing autism, and they've been told that they're crazy and they're stupid and that they're absurd, and they just felt bad because their kids were genetically messed up. No, like for 30 years, look at Jenny McCarthy and look at all the guys who've been talking about this. The parents have been talking about this for decades, and the doctors and the government have been trying to shut them down. And people have been talking about the benefits they're getting from anxiety, for sleep, for pain, for, relaxation, for calmness, for all the benefits using cannabis properly in smaller doses, dose dependent for the person. Again, dose matters. And they've been getting phenomenal results. But the medical community and the government is saying that that's not true, that everyone's lying, and that only they know the real truth, and that only they are allowed to talk about the real truth. And so the government then comes down and suppresses everyone's First Amendment rights and tells people they're not allowed to say the things they're saying. Remember, the CDC, the FDA, the NIH, the medical community is part of the government. So when the government comes down and says, you can't say this, you can't say that, they're violating the First Amendment. That's what's going on. They're suppressing your speech so they can maintain their power and their money flow. 100% what's going on. From the CDC, from the FDA, from the NIH, those are government organizations. And anytime the government tells you can't say something that damages the credibility or the function of the politics or the government, that is a First Amendment violation, just as an FYI. So anyway, if you guys have any more questions to this, if you want something more specific, we can get into this stuff really, really deep, but most people tune out when I start talking deep chemistry or deep neurology. So if you guys have questions, hit us up, toss them in the comments, love to talk about it. If you guys have any other stuff, we'll talk to you later. Have a fantastic day.